Well, President Trump may have been unclear about his intentions when it comes to Iran, but the Israeli assault remains extremely real and clear. Today, Israel launched strikes on Karaj, Zanjan and Kermanshah, but it's the capital, Tehran, that has been the main focus of its attacks. With a university used as a military academy, the police headquarters and the foreign ministry all being targeted. And tonight, Iran has imposed what it says are temporary restrictions on internet access. Our foreign affairs correspondent Secunder Kermani now reports.
In Tel Aviv, another night of missile alerts. Residents below rushing to bomb shelters. Those are the air raid sirens that you can hear, of course, up in the sky. Israeli interceptors being fired towards Iranian ballistic missiles. That's some of the flashes that you're seeing occurring. Just like that one over there, that's when they are intercepted, but we know that some of the missiles also do land. There were no reports of injuries though, and the salvos of Iranian missiles are becoming smaller. Setting off through the same skies, Israeli fighter planes. Iran's beleaguered air defences are no match. And for most people here, there are no shelters, no warning sirens. Israel is now able to launch massive strikes at will and across the country, targeting, it says, Iran's nuclear and missile facilities, but leaving the population terrified.
Inside the city, it was really terrifying. Everyone is scared. Last night they hit East Tehran. There was a huge explosion and the light filled everywhere. Most people have left.
Daily life is growing increasingly difficult. 2 major banks struck by cyber attacks. Most here oppose the regime. Some hope the war will finish it off. Others worry about the destruction being wrought.
If Iran's military and economic infrastructure is destroyed, it won't be the clerics who suffer, it's us, the Iranians, who pay the price.
No one would like to see their country engaged in war, including me. It is only tolerable if it ends in a good result for the whole nation, to be free from dictatorship.
Israel's strikes already feel relentless, and President Trump is deciding whether to order his own, unless, in his words, Iran unconditionally surrenders. Speaking from an unknown location, the country's supreme leader attempted to sound defiant.
Intelligent people who know Iran, know the Iranian nation, know the history of Iran, would never utter such a word. Surrender to what?
Iran's embattled regime is fighting for its existence. But one of its key uranium enrichment sites, deep underground, remains untouched. Seema Shine served as Mossad's head of research, specializing in Iran.
Can Israel destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities without American help?
I think Israel can cause a huge damage to the sites, and it's already done some of that. But to completely destroy the nuclear program, I don't think Israel can do on its own. And this is a huge, huge question now in Israel, whether, if Trump doesn't join the war, how do we finish this war, making sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to break out for a nuclear device.
Amid strike and counter-strike, reminders of the lives lost. Killed in Israel, 7-year-old Nastia from Ukraine being treated for leukemia. In Iran, this young poet, Pania. In 1,000 places I come to an end, she once wrote. A faded star that turns to smoke.
And Secunder joins me now. Secunder.
Well, Matt, according to one human rights group in Iran, close to 600 people there have now been killed in this war. Around half of them, or just under half of them, they identify as civilians. In Israel, 24 people have been killed, but we're no closer, no sign of any end to this bloodshed. There have been reports of 3 Iranian government planes landing in Oman, where talks between the Americans and the Iranians had previously been taking place. That's given rise to speculation. Perhaps there could be renewed negotiations. Iran's foreign minister, though, has denied that. I think the course of this conflict is really going to be determined by the decisions made by President Trump. Will he enter this war directly? If so, will the Iranians follow through on threats to target American bases in the region?
And guessing what he's thinking, well, that's anyone's guess. Sek, thanks very much indeed. So what will the US do next on that note? Once again, President Trump kept the world guessing, telling reporters, I may do it, I may not do it. But there are signs that the question of whether to intervene is starting to provoke divisions within Republican and MAGA ranks. Our Washington correspondent Siobhan Kennedy has this report.
President Trump was out in a hot and humid D.C. this morning to unveil his giant new flagpole on the White House lawn.
But would you say you're closer?
But there was only one question on reporters' minds. Will he or won't he strike Iran?
You know, I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
Having threatened the US could take out Iran's supreme leader yesterday and demanded an unconditional surrender, the president said Tehran was now wanting to negotiate,
yes,
even inside the White House.
I said it's very late. I don't know, there's a big difference between now and a week ago, right? Big difference.
The biggest difference, perhaps, is his stance towards Israel's war in Iran, because having distanced the US from the initial attack, President Trump is now considering using American B-2 stealth bombers to blow up nuclear facilities buried deep in the mountains of Iran that Israel alone cannot reach. On Capitol Hill today, the Defense Secretary refused to answer any questions.
Secretary, is the US going to bomb Iran?
But most Republican senators said they'd back whatever Trump decides.
The US should absolutely be involved, in my opinion. I mean, really and truly, I think Iran better get their act together or they're in big trouble.
Either you want them to have a nuclear weapon or you don't. And if you don't, if diplomacy fails, you use force.
But one said the president shouldn't join the war.
The president's instincts are good, and I'm hoping the president will not get involved with the war. I think if the United States actively bombs Tehran, the possibility of negotiation goes out the window.
Should America get involved on the side of Israel?
Well, of course we support Israel, but in terms of engaging in warfare, that's another question.
Today, Iran mocked the president's claim that their negotiators suggested coming to Washington for talks. No Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House. The only thing more despicable than his lies is his cowardly threat to take out Iran's supreme leader. Iran does not negotiate under duress. Trump's 100-foot flagpole is finally in the air, a bold symbol of his America First agenda that not long ago meant no more wars, perhaps not anymore, as the world waits on the president's next move.
Well, joining me now is Vali Nassa, a former US government advisor and professor of international affairs and Middle East studies at the Johns Hopkins University. Vali Nassa, great to have you on the programme. What do you think President Trump actually wants out of all this?
I think right now he's hoping that by threatening Iran with his over-the-top rhetoric, threatening bombing, that he would get the Iranians to actually agree to a negotiation and a deal that will make attacking Iran unnecessary. But the Iranians understand that if they give in without any showing teeth, any pushback, that they're not going to get anything in return. So they're not incentivized to actually come to the table at the moment. And so the pressure is on the president, because if he starts bombing Iran, then he has to be ready to deal with the consequences, most of which are pretty bad for the United States.
And what are you hearing about these 3 planes that have been spotted in Oman? Do you think they might be preparing to start negotiations again with Steve Witkoff?
It's possible. I think both sides are reaching out to intermediaries, both Washington and Tehran, Omanis, Saudis, Emiratis, Qataris. I'm sure they're all busy. Some of them are also themselves freelancing because they don't want war. And they're trying to find out a way in which they could bring the United States and Iran around the table and around the framework that could do 2 things. One is stop the fighting right now, and secondly, get a nuclear deal that would make the resumption of fighting unnecessary.
And when the Israelis talk about regime change or hint at it, do you think that that is actually what they want?
No, because there is no regime to change to. There is, unless they arrive in Tehran and are able to install a new regime, there is no leadership, no organization, no process through which a regime that is not or coming out of the existing regime could be installed. But I think actually they're not interested in transition of Iran into something better or something more stable. They see an opportunity to downgrade Iran as a state, as a potential threat in the future, beyond what its nuclear capability is. So I think they want to weaken Iran, weaken its state, weaken its institutions, perhaps even find ways to weaken its central government authority in favor of its provinces, as sort of more federalized, weaker Iran. And they are targeting ministries, institutions, not necessarily a military target, which suggests to you that the aim is different than just military.
And if things get much worse, do you think there's a danger that Iran might fall apart, become, like Afghanistan at one stage, or Libya after the removal of Gaddafi?
There's always that danger, but then it will be Europe and United States' problem, not Israel's. It will blow up onto the Gulf countries. It will impact Europe. That instability will not be contained within Iran. If Iran becomes like Syria and Libya, order of magnitude larger in terms of size, population, geography, topography, then there's not even a state that you can sanction or pressure or hold accountable. You have to deal with the consequences of a failed state in Iran, and the Gulf countries and their spectacular economic progress, their promise of their economies will all be vulnerable to what will come out of it.
Vali Nassa, thank you very much for joining us. And Israel's ongoing offensive against Iran has not lessened the fatalities in Gaza. In the past 24 hours alone, at least 140 people have been killed in Israeli attacks and gunfire across the Gaza Strip. That's according to local health officials. Medics said that 14 of those deaths were a result of Israeli troops firing on crowds, yet again awaiting aid trucks. Here's Harry Fawcett.
In Gaza, the mourning struggles to keep pace with the killing. They're grieving for some of those killed in shelling near a UN aid truck yesterday. The Israeli military saying it's investigating the incident in Han Yunis.
My martyred son's children cry all night because I can't even secure a kilo of flour for them. The martyr was all I had. He was alone. There's no one else to provide for them.
Today, as at least 14 more Palestinians were killed trying to get aid, Israel's military chief was leading an assessment of the war in Gaza as Israeli warplanes continue to hit Iran.
Striking Iran means striking the axis, from Yemen to every front you're aware of. And in the end, it reaches close here. It reaches Hamas.
It has now been just over 3 weeks since the US Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began its aid operations. The scheme has been accompanied by repeated shootings near the sites that locals have blamed on Israeli forces. Gaza's health ministry says since then nearly 400 people have been killed while trying to get aid. Early on, through carefully framed denials, Israel accused the media of falling for Hamas lies about the incidents.
Serious accusations made on Sunday in so much of the media. They were based on Hamas propaganda. The IDF has already proved them, has put out materials proving them to be false and baseless.
But increasingly, the Israeli military is admitting to having, in its words, fired close to people deemed to be a potential threat to its soldiers. Words that fail to address a reality in which unarmed Palestinians are left to compete for scarce aid inside Israeli military zones. And meanwhile, no let-up in the airstrikes. Gaza's health authorities today saying 140 people had been killed in the last 24 hours. Some here say they feel forgotten, with attention now focused on Iran. But Israel's assault on Gaza has not paused. Its devastation grinds on.